Now that we've had a chance to talk about what exactly the basic ingredients for knowledge are, right? Knowledge requires a belief that's true and is justified. This is the justified true belief account of knowledge. Now that we've talked about what that is, we need to talk about what exactly a skeptical scenario is, right? This is important to understand in order to make clear and to uh, uh, get a grasp on what we mean by skepticism, because skepticism essentially involves a skeptical scenario of some form. This is what we're going to call the skeptic's challenge, right? So let's talk about what exactly a skeptical scenario is. All right, so since we're dealing with the justified true belief account of knowledge, let's just begin there. Suppose that is the account of knowledge we're concerned with. A skeptical scenario is going to be any sort of situation or case or hypothetical imagined world where, for whatever reason, that in that situation, it causes us to doubt the truth of the relevant proposition or the relevant belief. Right. So if you are concerned with the belief that it's raining outside, then a skeptical scenario would cause you to doubt that belief. It would be a situation where you think that belief might not be true. Or another way of putting this is a skeptical scenario is a case or a situation, some hypothetical imagined world where we doubt whether that belief or that proposition is justified, right? So remember, we're dealing with a justified true belief account of knowledge. And so a skeptical scenario calls into question either the truth of the belief or the justification of the belief. Now, there's lots of different examples that we can use from popular culture. You're probably familiar with these different sorts of skeptical scenarios in one form or another. For instance, I remember back in the 80s, there was this movie I really enjoyed called Total Recall. It had Arnold Schwarzenegger in it. There's been an updated version. I think it came out in the early, maybe it was the later 2000s. But either way, Total Recall was this movie where a person kind of goes under a medical procedure where they're kind of living in a different world of some sort. Vanilla Sky is a similar sort of premise. It's a Tom Cruise movie where, his life, something terrible happens in his life. And so he decides to undergo a procedure where he's living in a dream and his body's like frozen and but he can like live out his greatest fantasies in a dream like world where he can do anything he wants, any world he wants to live in. Inception, I'm sure you've seen this movie. It's more recent. Inception is one of those movies that asks you to question whether or not you're living in a dream. You'll notice a lot of these skeptical scenarios involve the question of whether we're dreaming or awake, right? So Inception, even in the movie where they think they're waking up, maybe when they wake up, they're still dreaming. And so in their dream, they happen to wake up. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is one of my favorite skeptical scenarios. It's a movie that was done with Jim Carrey as the main actor, and in this movie, his memories are erased, right? So he's living a different sort of life. Another really interesting one that recently came out, I think about a year ago or so. I forget the name of it now, but it's on Apple TV, and it's where your mind is like disconnected. It's severed so that on when you go to work, you're living a different life than when you're outside of work. Um, uh, Severance is the name of it. It's pretty interesting premise as well. And then one that you may or may not be familiar with is The Matrix. This came out in the late 90s. And this is one of those situations where your entire life, you're nothing more than just like in a dream sort of world. You're connected to a machine, and the machine is pumping all of your experiences into your mind. And so you can't tell the difference between living in this virtual reality or real life, right? But everybody is sort of like in these little pods, and the machines are using humans as their source of energy. The first movie was pretty good. I'm not sure about the rest of them, but these are kind of popular culture examples examples from popular culture that illustrate what a skeptical scenario is. Um, Now, there's one particular skeptical scenario that I want to spend a little bit of time talking about for a few reasons. One is I think that it does a really nice job of illustrating what a skeptical scenario is. Two, I think that it's very popular in our contemporary sort of online social media. Folks like Elon Musk have been talking about this kind of a situation. But then the third reason why I think this is an interesting one to talk about is I think that it's not true. And I think that it's fairly easy to show that we're not in this particular scenario. But this is the simulation theory, right? Is it possible that we're nothing more than a simulated world? We're living in a simulated world. That's the question we're going to be considering. This was actually an interesting scenario that was put forth by a philosopher named Bostrom, who came up with this a while back, but it's been more recently advanced by folks like Elon Musk. But here's the way this particular scenario goes, right? So basically, you begin by recognizing that our current technology has advanced at an unbelievable rate, right? If you compare to our technology now to back in the 90s or even the 80s or even like 5 years ago, right? The technology is just increasing at an extremely fast rate. And so presumably 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now, we can't even imagine how advanced our technology would be, let alone 100 years from now. Presumably as long as we make it there that far, right? If we don't blow ourselves up first, right? So that's where we're going to begin. Our technology is moving in a very, very fast rate. So in the near future, our technology will be so advanced that we're going to be able to create a simulated universe that's just as real as our own universe, as our own world, the world that we take ourselves to be living in now. Right? That seems like it's fairly plausible given how fast our technology has already been developing just in the past 10, 20, 30 years, right? Now, the people in those simulated worlds that we're going to create in the next 20 to 50 years, or maybe 100 years, those people in those simulated worlds will not know that they are living in a simulation, right? They're not going to be able to tell that they're in a simulation. Those people in those worlds are going to, of course, go on to create other simulated worlds, just as we have created simulated worlds now, right? We have video games, we have virtual reality, right? And in our video games and our virtual reality, all these simulated worlds contains people who don't know they're in simulated worlds, right? So if this continues, recall all the advancement in our technologies, if that just goes on for many, many, many more years and many, many more simulated worlds, that's going to continue until finally we get to a world in that process that's just like ours, but they have not yet gotten there yet, right? They're trying to create a simulated world that's just as real as this world. They haven't done it yet. They're almost there. They just haven't gotten there yet. Right. So there's the real world, what we take ourselves to be living in. There's all the many, many simulated artificial worlds, just as real as this world. And then there's the very last world that has not yet created a world just as real as this one yet. They're working on it. They'll eventually get there. They just haven't gotten there yet. So what are the chances that we are currently living in a simulation? Right. So if you just like you put all of the different possible worlds out there, and let's suppose that you're going to throw a dart. You're going to blindfold yourself and throw a dart to see where the dart lands, right? There's one world that's the actual real world, and then there's the last world that is trying to create a simulated world just as real as this one, but it hasn't gotten there yet. And the rest of them are simulated artificial realities that are just as real as this one, but in fact, they're not real. They're simulated, right? So there's going to be millions of those, however many of those, and only two of these other ones, right? So if you throw a dart, the chances are that you're going to hit one of the simulated worlds. So it looks like the chances are we are currently living in a simulation. right? So that's the way that this kind of simulation theory goes. This is the skeptical scenario, right? So it might turn out to be the case that we really are living in a simulation. If you think that the chances are pretty high, right, and it does look like the chances are pretty high, then we have at least some reason to believe that we're in a simulation right now. But I think that there might be reasons to be suspicious of this, and that's why I wanted to bring this particular scenario up. Right. So here are some facts that we need to consider. Even though the artificial realities, these simulated worlds that we're considering are very, very detailed, down to the very last molecule, the very last particle, everything is just as real as this world, right? All of the complexity of the world seems to be very, very detailed. None of them actually come close to the complexity of our own universe, right? Another point that we should consider is that we have not yet created a simulated world that's just as real in every single detail as our own world, right? So we've created a lot of very detailed simulations, but we haven't created one that's just as complex down to the very particle on the far side of the cosmos, right? And then we also need to think about, given these facts, well, we're either the very last simulated world that's working on a simulated world that's just as real as this one. We just haven't gotten there yet. Or we are in fact living in the real world, not a simulated world. So it looks like, given the information we know, we're not living in a simulated world that's just as real as this one. We're living in either the very last world, the one that's trying to create other simulated worlds, or we're living in the real world.